Hello, everyone, and my name is Rebecca Fay. I'm from Natural Capital Partners, the Chief Marketing Officer, and I am delighted to welcome you to the third webinar in our series. Our series has been positioned as being on climate finance. This one's a little bit on the edge of climate finance, but nevertheless a really critical issue, and particularly critical on Earth Day. So very pleased to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which is this year on the theme of climate action. So we feel that climate justice is, as I said, a really critical element of climate action. Before I introduce our two wonderful speakers, I just want to go through a couple of logistics. Everyone is on mute, but please use the question box on the right-hand side to submit any questions you have or any comments you have. We will go through those. It's a half-an-hour webinar, and we will stick to time. So I will feed in your questions to the conversation as we go through the half hour. So please just keep them coming in, and we'll try and respond to as many as we can. And we are recording this webinar, so we will be sending you a link afterwards so you can listen again or share it with your colleagues and friends. And with that, let me introduce very briefly our two speakers. So both from Natural Capital Partners, we have Saskia Feast, who's based over on the west coast of the US, and we have Jonathan Shopley, who is based in the south of England. And I'm going to kick off with asking them each to answer a question before we go into a poll, which is to give us their view, of what they think climate justice means. There's lots of interpretations, so what they think it means. So Saskia, perhaps you could go first and say hello, and then talk to us about what you think climate justice means.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here on Earth Day. I think perhaps the best way to answer that question is to think about Gaylord Nelson, who is a senator from Wisconsin, who was one of the founders of Earth Day. And on his inaugural speech about Earth Day 50 years ago, 1970, he said that the goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty. The objective is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect for all other human beings and all living creatures, which I think really reminds us that climate justice has actually been a core part of climate action since the beginning of the program, certainly of this day. And perhaps along the way, we've kind of lost it a little bit and thought more about the technical, scientific and engineering approach and the calculation of greenhouse gases and all of those numbers. But what I think it means now is it's really about making sure that we bring the social and the human dimension into climate justice, because the poorest people on the planet are going to be the most impacted. We have 1 billion people who don't have access to any energy. We have 2.6 who still cook over an open fire. And climate justice is about moving to a low carbon economy, but ensuring that all of these people are also given the opportunity to enjoy healthy and sustainable lives. So Jonathan, what would you say?
Well, no, I just build on that, Saskia. Thanks very much, and hello, everybody. Happy Earth Day. You know, it's meant different things to different people. We interviewed Prof. Nick Robbins a couple of months ago on this issue after he'd published a study for the London School of Economics called Financing Inclusive Climate Action in the UK, an investor's roadmap for a just transition. And for Nick, as we discussed it, it really meant, you know, was very much focused on people and jobs as opportunities for employment change as we change the fundamental underpinnings of our energy system and our economy. His focus was really on making sure that we left nobody behind. So that was one element that has been, for many people, has been the sort of main focus of this. But in my role within Natural Capital Partners, I'm involved in representing business in the climate change negotiations. And one of the biggest issues there is the equity over time issue. The fact that most of the people in the countries of what is called the Global South had very little part in causing climate change, but are really the recipients of all the greatest effects of that. And it's that issue of trying to find a just transition that helps all people, all countries around the world make this transition is a very important one. But just a personal story, and I'm not going to attribute this to my family, but it could be anybody's family in lockdown. Walk into the kitchen of a morning and it's a hell of a mess. So you round on your children who happen to be, isolating with you and saying, who the hell left the kitchen in such a mess? And the response is, we might have left the kitchen in a mess, but you guys have left the earth in a terrible mess. What are you going to do about it? So that's all I'd add, Saskia, to your definition. I think we're all on the right track. It's about the human dimension of a technical, of what we first thought was a technical problem.
And I think just quickly, I think there's a difference between climate justice and a just transition in some ways. I feel like a just transition is a term that is more focused on the labor movements and thinking about, well, what happens to the fossil fuel workers? How do we get them a just and fair transition to new opportunities one industry may go, or hotel workers or different industries that we have to move away from. So I see that as a more labor focused term, and climate justice more around a lot of the equity, north-south equity, and also gender equity, very important to me, intergenerational. So I don't know if you would agree with that distinction.
I think that's a really useful one. And I think we in the climate space, we're used to calling for immediate action, but then relating that to a long-term journey. And I think, for the purposes of this webinar, Rebecca, given that you've asked the question, I think we're trying to embrace all of it. How do we take where we are today and start making those moves in a way that gives everybody fair access to work and a clean environment, etc. But at the same time, it really is about a long-term journey of building trust within communities that we can do this and meet their immediate needs.
And I think, just to add to Saskia, I think Mary Robinson, for instance, for the most part sees climate justice the way, Saskia, you're sort of articulating it in some of the work that she is doing. And after we've done the poll, I have a question about the Green Climate Fund and how that what the role of the Green Climate Fund is in those two sort of sides of the coin around the labour market and also the communities most impacted and least responsible for climate change. So, but before we do that, I think it would be worth just doing our first poll. So we are asking you all to just let us know how much climate justice is part of your sustainability program. So is it the cornerstone of your sustainability program? And if you can just take a minute to choose between one of those four options, then we'll have a look and see what people are thinking about. Interesting. So 71% strongly agree that it is the cornerstone of a sustainability program, which I have to say, that probably slightly surprises me in a very positive way, because I don't think, from the work we do with businesses all over the world who are using climate finance to meet their carbon emission reduction goals, and many of the projects they're supporting have an element of climate justice about them, but I don't hear a lot of our clients talking about climate justice and using that as a phrase. So that's a very interesting result there, I think. I don't know, Jonathan and Saskia, what you think. Does that surprise you, or is that what you would have expected?
That surprises me. But, I think kudos to the Sustainable Development Goals, which have sort of created ways of looking at these themes, you know, gender equality, access to water, access to jobs and energy. But, you know, the 17th goal is trying to build a holistic system around that. And I think what it signals to me is that the sustainability community, because I guess that's who we have in our audience today, are very alert to the fact that, you know, environmental change doesn't come without direct human involvement and attention to equity issues. What do you think, Saskia? Were you blown away by
No,
that?
I would. Yes, totally. I'd agree with that. It was a bit of a surprise, but I do see that actually that goal number 17, partnership for the goals, this idea of corporations partnering with small environmental NGOs and social entrepreneurs to actually have an impact in different areas to where their operations may be. I see that growing.
And sort of on that, sort of riffing on that theme of, you know, that we, yes, all those things we're seeing, the Sustainable Development Goals, sort of bringing these topics to the fore and sort of creating umbrellas for these topics, but climate justice as a phrase not being so commonly used. What can you tell me, both of you, you know, when and how did you first become aware of climate justice as being a really important issue over and above the just we've all got to reduce emissions, but the sort of human element of climate justice and climate action? Jonathan, when did you first become aware of that term?
Well, I can sort of pinpoint it actually. Saskia and I went to a conference in Vancouver called Globe, and I suspect a number of people know of it and probably have attended it. It's a it's sort of a major sustainability event every, I think, 2 years, if I remember correctly. And it's sort of unusual because it combines talks and panels with an exhibition area. And I was wandering around the exhibition area, and the first thing that caught my eye was this massive thing. It looked like a sort of 10 times bigger than an aircraft engine, and it was General Fusion's sort of pilot work on developing nuclear fusion. Yes, fusion as an alternative source. And, you know, I loved it. You know, as an engineer, I was drawn to it. You know, thought, wow, you know, this is an amazing technical solution. And then I sort of continued around and came to in the back of the exhibition hall, a little table with a big banner, not such a big banner, saying Iron and Earth, and a couple of guys standing there. And I sort of went up and I said, what's all this about? He said, well, we are tar sands workers, Canadian Alberta tar sands workers. And we are campaigning for a transition from our work in what is obviously a very polluting sector of the fossil fuels. But, you know, we depend, it's a great job, we're employed, we feel we're doing terrific work, but we know we need to be part of the future, and we don't know how to make that transition. So we're opening this conversation with our current employers, with the market, with universities, to sort of try and figure out how we can, as individuals, as family, you know, bread earners for families, make this transition. So for me, that was the first time that I really got my head around the fact that it's all about people and how they see their journey in this transition. Over to you, Saskia.
And I first kind of became aware of the term when I was at Presidio Graduate School doing an MBA in sustainable management. It was all about there was a lot of talk about the environmental aspect of sustainability, but there was a lot equal amount discussed with less that it seemed tangibly that we could do around the social aspect and the climate justice aspect. There were people who were policymakers in the program who were pointing out the inequities of some of the policies and how they fall on the poorest in our communities in North America. But it really became it got emphasized, and this idea of a just transition came out with Jerry Brown and what's happening in California with our cap and trade market, and then this talk about, well, what do we do about our own fence line communities here, and what is the direct environmental benefit that this carbon reduction program can have, and how do we square offsetting with what's happening to the communities of need here? And then when I actually went to visit for the first time a project in Guatemala, where we have this water filtration and cook stove project. I went to visit the families who are finally getting access to clean water and efficient cook stoves. And we built and replaced, an open area for burning with an efficient cook stoves. And you could see all the pollutants that these mainly women and children were exposed to on a daily basis, and people, collecting all the fuel for that, and really understanding how on the ground climate justice can look in providing access to better technologies and things. So it's been quite a journey, and this idea, this concept kind of keeps coming back, and I'm constantly curious about what is it that we can do every day in order to think about the people who aren't at the table currently in these discussions. Personally, women, we're often not. So, but everybody, there's other people, other that need to be present. And I think that's part of how we include climate justice going forward, is bringing those voices out.
Thank you. And that actually, Saskia, I think that leads in that sort of talk about visiting in Guatemala. We've had a question come in that I think that's quite relevant to, saying, sorry, let me just get to the right question because we've had a few. Talking about programs that deliver climate justice in their outcomes, but are they delivering justice through how they operate? Could you give an example of a project that puts the principles of climate justice into action in how it works? So, I'll leave it with both of you to see. I think you can to think, to respond to that one.
Shall I take that one or kick off? What I'd like to highlight is a long-standing relationship we've had with a project developer in India called Selco, run by a remarkable guy, Harish Handi. And we came across him in about 2002 or 3 when we were doing, most of our projects were afforestation projects in the UK. And one of our clients, SAM, Sustainable Asset Management, said, we're interested in going carbon neutral, but we don't want our project in the UK in forestry. We want renewable energy in a developing country. And we came across Selco. And, the reason why that relationship has lasted so long is that Selco is all about the communities. So we provided some carbon finance that acted as guarantees for people to take loans to put solar panels on their homes. And it went down very, very well with our clients. It was an absolute hit. So we sort of kept on calling up Harish at that stage saying, great, when can we have some more projects? When are you going to extend? And his response always was, it's not the money that's leading us to our next opportunity. It's making sure that we've engaged with the community, found out what their needs are, figured out how to make solar fit with their needs, trained people in that village to deliver the solution, and then to administer and maintain it on an ongoing basis. That takes time. Call us back in 5 years. Well, we just kept on calling him again and again, and we're still working with him and Selco, and an amazing team. And I think for me, that's a great example of how it's sort of community-led and therefore a just transition in its direct operations.
And I can build on that with another example. We have a great RED project in Malawi. And so I've been talking about gender equity as part of what I think climate justice is. And in that project, the design of a RED project requires engagement of the community to understand how the funds are going to be distributed. And in that project, there are requirements that in any governance committee, there are 30% representation from women, and that women are trained to be sellers as part of this community. So I think there are things that can be included in the design of any project to ensure that climate justice is, the outcomes are positive.
Great, thank you. And I think I said earlier that I was going to ask you about how the Green Climate Fund, how that sort of encompasses the climate justice issues. So I want to come to that before we go on to another question. So yeah, Jonathan, have you got sort of thoughts about is climate justice one of the priorities of the Green Climate Fund? And whether it is or not, how do you think it is doing in terms of contributing to climate justice?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm normally very optimistic, and you're probably going to get a slightly sort of darker side. The Green Climate Fund was very much about equity, addressing the equity, the fact that developing economies don't have access to finance or technology, didn't have much contribution to the problem we find ourselves in with climate, and are suffering from the effects. So when we, when all nations came together to strike the Paris Agreement, one of the requests from developing economies was, listen, we need some finance. And so the Green Climate Fund was set up, and the goal was to collect $100 billion and have that money available to help communities that needed access to finance to make these mitigation adaptation projects work. Now, the reason why I'm a bit down on this is the concept was fantastic. And in fact, without that, I'm not even sure we would have been able to strike the Paris Agreement, because it was so, it really needed that encouragement to developing economies that are really looking, to build wealth creation within their countries. So we look at the Green Climate Fund now, and they're doing an okay job. They're taking their money, they're dispersing it into projects which probably do have checklists about, their relevance in local communities. But, you hold that, and the main thing to know about it is it's struggling, really struggling to get $100 billion into that fund. I think they might be a little bit north of somewhere between 20 and 30 billion. Now hold that out to what? The $5 or $6 trillion that have just suddenly been made available across governments over the last 2 months to sort us out through the COVID-19 crisis. It was a great concept, but it really has got a long way to go before it addresses the equity issue, the North-South equity issue.
Saskia, anything you want to? Yes, exactly. Anything, Saskia, anything you want to add there, or do you feel that Jonathan has covered off the challenges of the Green Climate Fund very effectively?
I think yeah, it's good.
Okay, so let me move on then to again, and Jonathan, you mentioned the Paris Agreement, so I think that brings us nicely onto the question of the net zero, the transition to net zero, and our global transformation of our economy. How does a just transition fit with that global transformation that we need to get to net zero by 2050?
Who's taking that first? Is that me?
Saskia, do you want to go first?
Well, I can talk a little bit about that.
I'm just uncertain because, Rebecca, it looks like you're looking straight at me, but I realize that's just because I'm on the screen.
Yes, exactly.
Saskia, over to you.
Where were we again? We're on how does
the just transition fit with what we're doing, what was required to be done
to get to
transform our economy to get to net zero?
Well, to me it seems like if we don't do this equitably, then we continue to have these problems. I mean, our environmental problems are really problems about humans, and what we need to do is we need to provide all of us access to shelter, reasonable work, and health. So I think it's integral that we consider climate justice in this program and in our transition. So you've got to think about climate change. Some people are not going to have access to food, and some people are not going to have access to water. And so we need to there's lots of different tools we have to deploy. Our particular focus is carbon finance through the sale of offsets. So where can we deploy that fund cost effectively to ensure that those communities are going to be able to survive climate change and hopefully thrive?
So, I agree with all of that, but I'd like to, maybe I could just sort of give an example of that. So for me, if you're building in climate justice into the work that we do, really what you're looking to do is build empowered resilience within the communities where our projects are located. And, the one that I am very impressed by, but there are many that I'm very impressed by, is a project that we've helped, well, our clients have helped finance in Vietnam, which is a biogas project. And basically, carbon finance is used in the early stages to build competence amongst the community of bricklayers who make those sort of mini nuclear reactors that collect all the methane from animal waste and then use that either for cooking or lighting. What I love about that project, what so impresses me, is that the climate finance goes to the costs of building these biodigesters, but equally, in time, as it scales up, we get a whole subsector of the bricklaying community, which are these biodigester makers, and they become profitable. And when they become profitable, they are resilient, and carbon finance can be withdrawn. The impact of that finance creates a massive amount of reductions as smallholder farms successively move into this sort of methane capture technology. And then we get this thriving subsector of stonemasons that don't need any government support and help and grant aid, which we're all, by the way, involved in this. And the government's role in bringing it together with an environmental NGO from the Netherlands originally and Germany, then sort of recedes, and they license these bricklayers to continue their business and just worry about quality and continuity. I think that's a really fantastic example of where communities and businesses are really building this empowered resilience.
Terrific. Thank you very
and I
much.
think that is great, Jonathan, because it does show that this is a transitionary tool.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, and the goal is ultimately to be able to sort of extract yourself because it becomes self-sustaining. A bit like the goats in Kulera, the exchange of goats, which is the circular economy in effect, I guess. So we've actually, gosh, the time has gone really quickly. Goodness, we've only got 3 minutes left. So I think that what we should do next is just quickly do our second poll and then have the last couple of minutes for a wrap up. So for everyone there, everyone listening, as we come out of the global lockdown, shelter in place, staying at home orders that we're all living under, climate justice must continue to be at the heart of all sustainability programs. So we had obviously 71% felt that it was already at the heart of their programs, but obviously, things are going to change as we try and move on after this pandemic. So what do you feel about its priority going forward after this rather extraordinary period that we're going through now? Strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and everyone strongly agrees, which is hardly surprising. Thank goodness for that. So that's fantastic. I'm very pleased that everyone strongly agrees with that it is still a really critical part of climate action. So in our last couple of minutes, Saskia and Jonathan, I just would like to ask you each to sum up what are the top 2 points that you take away from this conversation? What are the 2 things that you think are most critical for people to consider and think about as they go away and think about their sustainability programs going forward and these issues of climate justice?
So for me, it sort of sums up into, we need 3 things really for our action on climate change. We need technology, we need finance, and we need people and people's trust and change to trust this transition enough to participate fully in that. So, we've seen, as I said, $6 trillion sort of hit the market to do a bunch of things. I think for me, the real message about the COVID crisis is that we do have the money, we do have the will, but now we need to translate that into trust and behavior change and a way in which we can include and build empowered resilience across all communities that are affected by climate change.
Saskia, over to you.
I think what what this whole pandemic really highlighted is how connected we all are. And so rather like this health crisis, climate change is going to impact us all too. And so we need to think about the most, we have these resources. How do we deploy them so that in the projects that are funded, everybody is empowered and part of the solution? How do we build resilience? And that is about the people. I think it's kind of interesting that, Jonathan, you and I are talking about this because you're a trained engineer and I'm a trained scientist, analytical, data-driven, and we've been working at this for a while and come to the conclusion that actually it's about the people. And I started out as a member of Amnesty International thinking about human rights being the ability to be heard. And I still have a strong passion for that. I think we have to we have to listen to the other people as we design our sustainability programs and develop solutions that will provide justice as well as a reduction in emissions.
Wonderful, thank you. I couldn't agree more. Obviously, that's lucky. So thank you. We're 1 minute over, so we're going to end now. We actually have our own Natural Capital Partners internal Earth Day celebration, virtual Earth Day celebration to go to. Thank you, everyone, and we wish everyone the best and for healthy times from wherever they're working, and a slightly strange celebration of Earth Day this year, but nevertheless still critical. So thank you all for attending, and best wishes to all. Thank you, Jonathan and Saskia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.